Hey everybody, it's Cory from CoryBakerFilmmaker.com, and I just saw Yesterday, written by Jack Barth and Richard Curtis, and directed by Danny Boyle. So caught this flick at the Burbank 16, AMC 16. Big news though, the Alamo Drafthouse is having its preview screenings. I already have Lion King booked. So prepare yourself because I will be doing a Lion King review and telling you all about the new Alamo Drafthouse, which has been a running conversation here on this review series. And can't wait to see it. And as far as the AMC 16, same old, same old. This was in regular digital, so the seats were not as up to snuff as like the Prime or the Dolby Vision ones, but it's still a great place to see a movie, and great concession choices and stuff like that too. So the plot of Yesterday, the nutshell, the easy way to describe it to somebody is: imagine you woke up tomorrow and everyone else forgot about the Beatles except for you, and you happen to be a musician, and go from there. And that's basically sort of where we're coming from with this one. It's a interesting flick because it's, has the chance of sort of like having all this Beatles music, but sort of having people's natural first time reactions to it, which is interesting. So much of this movie really comes down to Himesh Patel and Lily James, who are our two main leads. Really, other than that, there's only a handful of people. Joel Fry playing Rocky is prevalent in the movie. We have a lot of Ed Sheeran and Kate McKinnon is favored heavily throughout the last half of the movie about. Yeah, but so Himesh Patel and Lily James. I love Lily James. I think I'm going to be number one fan club material for Lily James because she is just incredible. And I loved her in Baby Driver. I thought she was phenomenal in that movie. And the whole first half of the movie, I was watching this thing going like, I know that girl. I know her from somewhere. I have no idea what it is. And it allowed me to just get inside of the character, just be her, Ellie Appleton. And it's just so nice to have that because she's so good at like just not being Lily James, but being whoever she is playing. And I think it's like the number one skill an actor can have. That's like you can't teach that either. It just sort of like happens. Some people can just do that, can shapeshift in that way. But she was phenomenal, and she hit every single note she was supposed to in this movie. Pitch perfect. I'm really blown away. If for nothing else, I think that Yesterday is worth seeing for her. Himesh Patel was very talented. I enjoyed watching him. I enjoyed his energy. He had a good energy about him. But I don't know if it's just that he doesn't have the reps or if it's just something that was kind of like a decision built into his character, or if maybe just him as a performer, he's not as like dramatic or out there, but he seemed to be playing it a little bit restrained. And, it was a really good performance. I really enjoyed it. But it felt like there was another note there that wasn't hit. And I hate that I'm using all these musical references. It would almost be interesting to see what it would be like if another more seasoned actor had been given the role. But then also in line with what I was talking about with Lily James, how she sort of shapeshifts into these things. By not having ever seen Himesh Patel before as an actor, I can believe of him as Jack Malek a lot quicker. And that can be the secret sauce to a lot of these movies where you're trying to introduce somebody as it plays into the overall ability for a person to put themselves into this position and believe that the characters that they're watching on screen are real people. And I think they both did a wonderful job in that regard. So onto the sort of like the time shifting nature of this movie. I think they did enough to convince us that the Beatles didn't exist and that Jack was coming up with all these songs and like people were hearing them for the first time and reacting like they were and stuff like that. I thought it was interesting that there were other things that were gone, like Coke and Oasis, because there was such a basis off of the Beatles. But I think that sometimes it just got lost in the shuffle a little bit. Like, so I could definitely see Jack Malek playing a couple shows with Beatles songs that nobody had ever heard before, and somebody wanting to like help record an album of that stuff, I can believe that he would get a record contract and they would try and push him as like the greatest songwriter of the generation because he had 20 of the all-time Beatles best hits on like this double disc that they're going to release. So all of that makes perfect sense to me. It's just what kind of makes this feel a little bit of a miss is that there isn't a moment where the Beatles music is ruined. Like I was talking with somebody about Leonard Cohen, who's one of our greatest songwriters ever, and he didn't have a very exceptional voice. Bob Dylan is another great example of this. Great songwriter, doesn't have the classic great voice. These people would just not be allowed to have musical careers today. I mean, if you can't fit into, some provocative outfit, both male and female, then there's no way you're going to be a successful musician anyway. It's just part of, you have to be sold as a commodity so much more than you ever had to before. And it just would not play for people who did not have the look or the voice or the something. I mean, like, you can fix a terrible voice with autotune, but it's not quite the same thing. It's like you have to have some semblance of something that can be turned into an autotune voice. And, Leonard Cohen didn't have that. So it's almost hard to believe that he didn't come to the record label with these songs and then they make him change them and make them like poppy, auto-tuney nonsense garbage. Because, I mean, Jack... Himesh Patel he has a good voice. He seems to be able to play the guitar and piano really well. And he's really like, he's a good performer. I enjoyed him on stage, but it's just not what happened. I mean, like, this just, the Beatles wouldn't be released today. That's part of the problem is that they spend all this time like thinking of things that can be taken away from us. Like, nobody's ever heard of Coke before. It's like, so every once in a while he has to like begrudgingly get a Pepsi. Like, oh, what an indignity. But like what they're not tackling is how the Beatles music would be taken in today's age. Not so much as like just being allowed to be released like carte blanche. And like sort of if you weren't going to go in that direction, because it felt like it wanted to be more serious. So if you're not going to go in that direction, you could have gone a little bit more campy, and you could have thrown in a couple more like Easter eggs for the Beatles, or sort of just made it feel more to the vibe of the Beatles. I mean, Across the Universe did this really well, where it had its serious moments and the screen was serious, like everything you were seeing on screen was serious, and then there were times where it got into like sort of the psychedelic Beatles phase, and the imagery on the screen got more psychedelic. I mean, it's something that can happen. It's just how you wanted to frame the movie you were making. And while I love Richard Curtis, and I think that he does a great writing job on this movie, I think that there's sort of this, because we've put it in the Richard Curtis romantic comedy, like kind of mold, it feels like it's missing. It feels like it's too much of a romantic comedy and not a realistic exploration of what a real world where only one person or a couple people remember the Beatles is. I mean, like, it just feels like it misses it a little bit there, and that's me the biggest fault of the film. So thinking more along the lines of sort of like the Richard Curtis nature of this film, I feel like the note of being sort of more romantic comedy-ish than a real exploration of an ideal is a detriment to the film. And I think I might be pulling too many Hugh Grants out of my Richard Curtis filmography, where I think of somebody who is like, charming, and even though he's goofy and unusual and not quite exactly what you imagine, like Himesh Patel doesn't have that Hugh Grant thing, and that's not a knock. That's Hugh Grant might be the best at that Hugh Grant thing. So I mean, like, it's really it's tough to necessarily say that this. I mean, like, sometimes these movies, with all their best intentions, still just don't hit exactly the way that they're supposed to, and it's not to say that it's a bad movie or that it's not an enjoyable movie, because both those things were true. It's just didn't quite get enough of the bat. It just sort of it skirted off a little bit to the side, and That's why you only hit one out of every day. Like, it's hard to make a movie, and it's hard to know exactly how it's going to play out when it's all finished. And any movie that comes out and is enjoyable and, makes you go to the car and start listening to Beatles music, I think wins in the end. I mean, it's a very good movie and it's worth seeing. I don't know if it's worth rushing out for, though. Last point I'd like to make, sort of specifically about having the Beatles music in this. So obviously, like, all the best Beatles songs are here in some way or another. Your personal favorite may not have made the cut, but there are plenty enough Beatles songs that everyone loves here to make it enjoyable. And every one of them was done really well. And I could believe they did a good job of setting up a universe where I believe that this is the first time that these people was hearing this music, and it was wonderful. It was really well done. And there's a part of me that could see them going for it a little bit more and doing better or doing worse. So it's kind of like they definitely hit the sweet spot for the broad acceptance of the use of this music in this film. But again, they could have, gone a little bit harder and maybe tried something a little bit different and created something new and interesting that people would have enjoyed and would have made the Beatles music more relevant and like a new generation. And that's the deal. I mean, like, I feel like this movie kind of succeeds because they do the Beatles music the way that the Beatles would have done it, but at the same time, like, this movie doesn't feel very particularly now. Like, this movie could be enjoyed sort of equally if this was made in the 80s or the 90s or anything like that. It just feels like it could have just been changed a little bit. Like, Ed Sheeran could have been somebody else, and this whole movie could have been at any point in time, but it didn't feel particular to this moment in time. And that's sort of it's tough to understand why they did it that way and what the results of their thought process were if they were interested in going a little bit different and how they were going to actually play the songs and how they were going to compose them and stuff like that. You say hello and I say leaderboard. Yet another one on the list for the AMC Burbank 16 Alamo Drafthouse coming in the next review, so look forward to that. On to the movie leaderboard. These are the movies that are the hardest because, like, it feels like somebody who specifically wanted to see, like, somebody doing the Beatles would be upset that this wasn't exactly what they wanted. And then I think that there's people who, like, there's no way to please everyone with this kind of movie, and I think they made choices and they played it a little bit more safe. And I think that because it's a good movie, it sort of sits in like an average kind of review place because they played it safer, and that's fine. It's just you're minimizing your ability to be thought of in higher regards if you pull back and play it safe a little bit. But if I had to give yesterday a rating, I would give it a 7.7. Definitely worth seeing. It really doesn't need to be at the theater. I'm sure that everyone involved would like you to see it at the theater, but this movie will play very well on Netflix or whatever streaming service it ends up on at some point. And I think people might watch it there and say, like, oh, wow, how did we miss this? And this is a great movie. Or like, wow, Netflix does it again with their innovative original content. And you're just like, wait a minute. But yeah, that's it. Anyway, if you want more of me, you can go to my website, CoryBakerFilmmaker.com, Facebook.com/CoryBakerFilm, at LegendsTV5 on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. I'm going to go see Lion King for our next review. Let me know if there's anything else you want to see. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is rapidly approaching. I will definitely be seeing that. I will be seeing it right away, and I will be telling you all about it on the review as soon as I do. But yeah, any other thoughts? Send me a message, leave me a comment, like, subscribe, check out the podcast version, anchor.fm/CoryBakerFilm, and that'll do it. So, Until next time.